Good afternoon. Thank you all for coming. I know you've just eaten, and it's challenging to keep your eyes awake. So I'm going to try to cover quite a lot of material in a very short period of time, so I'll hopefully give you something to keep you awake as your lunch settles in. You know, our first keynote today, which was fantastic, was looking out over sort of technology and looking out over the world and identifying what some of the future trends are. And what I'm going to do is bring it more close to home and talk specifically about trends and developments and the things that are driving the implementation of technology in higher education or tertiary education throughout the world. And I'm going to be talking about what's called the Horizon Report. How many of you are familiar with the Horizon Report? So some are. Let me take some time to talk about that with some introductory remarks. But what's really fascinating when we saw this morning what the future looked like, and those of us who have worked in higher education for a long time get very jealous because, you know, it follows a very predictable upward exponential linear curve. Well, if you've worked in higher education for any period at all, you know that that's not how change is experienced in higher education. It doesn't go in an exponential way. It moves in what we would call fits and starts. And so the idea of predicting the future in higher education is particularly challenging. How often have you heard that we are at an inflection point in higher ed? You know, this year we're at an inflection point. Next year we're at an inflection point. The year after that, we seem to keep waiting for these inflection points that oftentimes are very elusive and seldom happen. So it makes it challenging to try to determine when those inflection points will be reached. When will we start to achieve a movement from ad hoc innovation toward transformation, which is the mantra that we all talk about. I've heard maybe 10, 15 times today talking about digital transformation. Let me start by introducing you to some people. So the fun thing about being here is being surrounded by people who have great passion around the difference that technology is making, can make, will make in intersection of higher education and technology. So here's 100 other people. These are the staff at Educause. Educause is an international organization that is focused on strengthening and advancing higher education through technology innovation. And I'm lucky to serve as the president of Educause and very fortunate to be invited here with you today. What I've been asked to talk about is a report called the Horizon Report. The Horizon Report has come out for almost 20 years. It's very well read around the world. One thing that happened December, about a year ago, the New Media Consortium, the organization that has produced the Horizon Report, closed its doors. And it was very sad for those of us like me and many of you who follow the Horizon Report regularly. But what we did as Educause was we went ahead and are continuing the Horizon Report. So we put together the 2018 Horizon Report, which I'll show you shortly. And then after that, we've made a commitment to continue the Horizon Report. So here's the URL. I'll show this at the end. You can download it. It's free, and it gives you a glimpse into what experts in our world of higher education, technology innovation believe the future will be. The great strength of the Horizon Report is that it is unapologetically international. So many of the examples that you'll read about in the Horizon Report are truly international and not US-based, which is sometimes one of the occupational hazards for Educause being a US-based international higher ed IT organization. I should also mention that Educause is moving even more into a more deliberate focus on international higher education IT, ICT. We're launching an international task force in a few months so that we can be more responsive to international issues, to be able to also have US, North American higher ed organizations benefit from the real innovation I've seen here just in the last 2 days. Educause has 250 colleges and universities that are members. And I don't want to talk about Educause, but I do want to say one data point, and that's that between last year and this year, we've seen a 40% increase in international members coming to events, whether they're online events or face-to-face events. And what I think it shows is the real hunger for not thinking about ourselves within regions or within geopolitical borders, but really understanding that the challenges around higher ed, IT, ICT innovation really are an international experience, and we have so much to learn from one another. So the Higher Education Horizon Report follows a really interesting methodology. It's a sort of modified Delphi approach. So every year we bring together 70 experts who use a method to go from the universe to really 18 specific topics, and I'll give you an introduction to them. But not only looking at trends that are going to affect technology innovation, looking at obstacles and impediments, and then also looking at the technology developments themselves. Within each of these areas, there's usually a time horizon, so identifying this is what's happening in the next year or two, this is next 2 or 3 years, but usually within a 1 to 5 year time frame, as you'll see shortly. One of the things we've also tried to do with the Horizon Report since 2017 is not only to focus on the specific concrete topics, but also to step back and identify some meta themes that you know, the topics come and go. You'll see when I show you. This year it's adaptive learning, next year it's something else. But there are these larger meta themes that are worth tracking along with the topics that come and go from year to year. And I'll mention some of those right now. So the first section of the report looks at some of the trends that are accelerating the adoption of technologies within higher education. If you start at the very top, these are short-term technologies, trends rather, that are affecting higher education. There is no surprise here that the first one is measuring learning and the focus on measurement, the focus on, and so many other aspects of that, documenting learning, but also efficiency as institutions are dealing with tighter budgets over time. The second short term is redesigning learning spaces, which is such an exciting area to look at. In the midterm, as probably the two that I would focus most on in the brief amount of time that I have. One is the proliferation of open educational resources. And in many countries, this is driven by a real frustration at the lack of affordability of higher education. In the US, we look at the textbook prices going up 300% over 10 or 20 years. But it's driven by more than that as well. It links into this larger movement around open. So whether it's open educational resources or IMS Global talking about open standards and promulgating open standards, or the work we've done in Educause looking at next generation digital learning environments and trying to focus on interoperability as the key to the future of these new environments. It won't be one gigantic software solution. We believe it will be a number of highly modular and interoperable solutions that come together to create an ecosystem to focus on student learning. Continuing down, you can see the two long-term trends worth talking about: advancing cultures of innovation and cross-institutional collaboration. But I'd just like to talk about one more along with the proliferation of open educational resources. And I should have said with OER too, the other thing we're seeing is a movement from ad hoc OER to really full programs, full degrees that are being offered with no textbooks and no textbook cost to students at all. They're called Z degrees, and they're becoming quite popular in the US to be able to cut and eliminate that really expensive cost for our students. But the other one underneath the midterm is really important, and that's the rise of interdisciplinary studies. And we've been talking about that throughout the day today. So many sessions have talked about sort of the negative drive is to make the curriculum more relevant, the belief that higher education is no longer focusing on the skills and the specific skills that will be needed for employability in the future. And so there's a lot of sort of driving in that way. But what's the most compelling, and when you read the report, is just the true excitement of genuine multidisciplinary work and the way that technology can drive that with more problem-based interactions, with the ability to use technology to bring together different schools of knowledge in one specific course. And that's genuinely exciting, looking out, in this case, over 3 to 5 years. The last one I would talk about is cross-institutional, cross-sector collaboration. I would argue that that's really key to our long-term success in higher education. At Educause, it's one of our strategic priorities because we recognize that we can do so much more together than we ever can do by ourselves. I think it's particularly urgent when it comes to how we approach technology innovation at our colleges and universities. So I don't know if there's a Spanish expression, but do you have an expression for people working in silos? The idea that this is my work, I'm here, this is your, stay out of my silo. I always talk about how terrible silos are, and somebody told me, stop saying that, they're not silos, they're cylinders of excellence. Well, I don't think so. Generally, we acknowledge that the future of this thing that we're calling digital transformation will not work in silos. We can't define our work in such narrow ways. And all the conversations today, at one point or another, made a comment somewhere along these lines. The key to digital transformation is going to be for us to find new ways to work together. If you read Educause Review, you'll see all kinds of expressions of this. I have a feature article coming out in this month, actually, talking about what I'm calling strategic IT, that the history of ICT and IT on our campuses has tended to be a legacy of being a utility. This idea that the people who run technology work in the background, and you never hear from them until something breaks, and then you realize how much you're relying on them. So this idea of a utility IT isn't going to get us where we need to be. And some of the vestiges of a utility IT is that IT is the organization that gets to say no. Yes, we'll do that. No, we won't do that. And that's just it. Well, the universe is changing toward IT as a strategic asset. And so when I meet with rectors and presidents and chancellors, I try to urge them to say, when you're thinking about technology, understand that it has to be woven into the entire fabric of the institution. That technology offers the greatest promise of solving some of the most intractable problems and challenges in higher education, whether it's student success or student retention, whatever you want to point to. Technology offers these amazing new tools to solve institutional problems, so probably having the technology professionals reporting to the someone 3 layers down in an organization isn't going to be what we need for genuine digital transformation. And when I talk to the technology leaders on our campuses, I try to explain to them the need for us to be leaders, for us to be at the table, for us to be able to tell the story of technology innovation in a way that's compelling for institutional leaders so they can see that technology isn't hype, because that's what they see so much, is the hype of something that everybody thinks is going to change higher ed, and then nothing ever happens. They need to understand that this is the key to their realization of their institutional goals. And with that, we could discover some different metaphors. Technology is not something done in isolation. The metaphor I love is the barn raising of the 18th century and 19th century, where you bring together a community to accomplish something that you literally couldn't do by yourself. And that's really what digital transformation is. So back to the Horizon Report, you can see in the report every year some of the comings and goings. In this case, what are some of the trends that were important in 2012 but not in 2018. It's a really fascinating longitudinal way to get a sense of how technology innovation is coming and going and waxing and waning across the higher education sector. The second part of the report looks at some of the significant challenges that are in the way of technology adoption. And the way the Horizon Report groups these challenges is in solvable challenges. Those are challenges where we understand the problem and we know how to solve it, and we figure it'll take less than a year to get it solved. The difficult challenges are those that we understand but don't know necessarily what the best solution is, and those have a longer time frame. And then there are these wicked challenges, and those are the ones where we maybe don't even fully understand the challenge, much less the solution. So when you look at the solvable challenges, you see their authentic learning experiences, and we've had so much conversation about that today. The president of Northeastern talking about how courses can't function in a cocoon. You have to have authentic education with real-world problems and real-world problem solving as the key to authentic learning. You can also see how technology plays into this. I was recently at Case Western Reserve and saw how they're using augmented reality, not just for the things you would expect, like using it to do anatomy and physiology, where you could reach out and touch a heart and look at it in very exciting ways, but they're also using augmented reality for dance, to find a way to add a whole other layer to the experience of performance, which is just shows the tremendous potential for authentic learning. I would maybe jump down to the wicked problems, the wicked challenges, and just point out how wicked they really are. You think about economic challenges and the complexity of them. Some institutions in higher education, when the economy is bad, enrollment goes up. Others, when the economy is bad, enrollment goes down. And this changes based on the kind of institution and your geographical location. If you think about economic pressures, political pressures, think about just in the last year, we've had in the US net neutrality, which has a potential to have a dramatic change in how networking happens. In Europe, we've had GDPR, which has been a transformational pressure and change. You know, in the US, I can just say we've had some very exciting political dramas, all of which affect higher education in one way or another. So here you can see a breakdown of some of the challenges that have happened here and there over the years. You can see one of the challenges is improving digital literacy, and it's really interesting because it's been seen as a solvable problem, but if you look at it, it's been solvable year after year after year after year. And I think the explanation for that is that the initial problem of digital literacy was digital literacy with digital skills. I think now it's advanced and it's evolved to a much more nuanced, much more interesting set of digital literacies around digital citizenship and things like that. So I don't think it's a problem that continues. It's a problem that has evolved and changed. Well, back to digital literacy, I would mention JISC, a UK organization, did a study on digital literacy, and I think the sense of urgency comes through there because they found that of the 20,000 students they surveyed, 80% said digital literacy was important, and less than half said that they felt prepared based on the courses they took at college or university. The third section of the Horizon Report looks at important developments related to the specific technologies, and I've got literally 3 minutes left, so all I'm really going to do is point to them and say, if I was writing a book about technology innovation, these would be the chapters. Analytics, makerspaces, adaptive learning, artificial intelligence, which we've talked about throughout the morning, mixed reality, robotics. These are tremendously important topics. The one thing I would say, though, is the sort of grounded focus on student success that you can see between the lines here. You take analytics, you take adaptive learning and artificial intelligence, and these are all technologies that either now are playing and certainly in the next 5 years will play a role in creating a student experience that will be increasingly designed to help them be successful, to nudge them when they fall behind, when they need to be nudged, but also to create an experience that's more suited to the way they learn, the way they want to learn, and the way that they can be successful. So this is interesting. These are the comings and goings of the specific technologies. Pretty interesting. There you see MOOCs, and I know we're going to talk about this next, which is why I'm highlighting it. But how about that? MOOCs were a big splash in 2013, and then nothing. And you know, sometimes it's more interesting the things that aren't in the Horizon Report as it is the things that are there. I would ask our panelists to say what happened to MOOCs. You could say they started off with so much hype that they could never live up to, and so there was only one place to go from there, and it was down, and so it never appeared on the Horizon Report. Another explanation could be that so much of the excitement around MOOCs, the focus on openness, the focus on democratization of education, the focus on online, just became embedded in so many other areas that the substantive excitement around MOOCs has continued. You can take whatever theory makes sense to you. You could also take away from it a cautionary tale that hype has perils in higher education. In business and industry, hype is good. It generates excitement. In higher ed, it tends to generate resentment, oftentimes. I wonder if the same thing might be visible in virtual assistants. You see them appearing and then disappearing, and yet you see artificial intelligence taking off, and I think virtual assistants became a thing, but now is wrapped into a much larger conversation about how technology tools can use artificial intelligence in a way to serve students' needs more effectively. Well, there's a lot here, and I have 25 seconds. So I think the great thing about the Horizon report isn't that it answers questions in a really definitive way. It's really a way to start really good conversations about the intersection between technology, higher education, and learning. I would encourage you, if you have not been an avid reader of the Horizon report, to download it and give it a try. I think you'll find a lot of illumination there. I think you'll find a lot of good questions. It's a wonderful tool to use at your campus, at your company, to start a conversation about technology innovation, technology change in higher education. Thank you all so much.